Good afternoon and welcome to Lunchtime Series 2023, where we aim to add value to people's lives, happening every Wednesday and Thursday on ebizradio.com. We aim to value to people's lives, but we've been doing it for 3 years already. It's quite remarkable. We chat about everything leadership, coaching, and marketing, and you can catch the latest Lunchtime Series on all your major podcast channels today, guys. And to help us grow the channel, please follow, like, and share. Back in today's marketing and leadership segment, we've got the wonderful and amazing Craig Page-Lee, marketing and communications expert and co-host. Hello, Craig. How are you doing?
Kevin, great. Thanks. Yeah, thanks for that welcome and intro today. Classic, eh? All good. My side, and great to see we back in the rhythm of things. Second show for 2023, and screaming onto that 100 milestone soon.
Yeah, you know, I'm not someone who's very, very astrologically driven, but apparently there are many planets that they've come out of retrograde and full steam ahead. So I'm gonna
Fantastic.
That means something. So we're full steam ahead, and I'm glad that we are. Getting back to our regular format, Craig. So what are the key takeaways from our listeners can take away from last week's conversation?
Kevin, yeah, thanks. The key reminders from last week are from the report that was published by Euromonitor International, and it was titled The 10 Global Consumer Trends for 2023. Again, as noted last week, the report is published annually with the core purpose of actually providing insights so that companies can really get to know what consumers want. So let's just take a quick look at each point there, Kevin. So the first point was authentic automation, which is tech with a human touch. And the key takeaway point here is that businesses need to embrace authentic automation to strengthen the shopper journey or actually lose customer attrition. Point two, concept of budgeteers, and the meaning of that is that the cost of living crisis here is that businesses really need to implement or develop solutions that actually help budgeters save while also evaluating their own overhead expenses. Point three is control the scroll. A really, really great statement, this. And then the essence of this is about screen time well spent. The key takeaway point here is that to control the scroll, businesses have an opportunity to redefine the digital experience with efficiency and integrated capabilities. The fourth point was economic, and the theme there is about sustainability by default. The takeaway point for this particular field is that organizations need to step up to help economic consumers save their money and the planet. Point five is game on, and the theme around game on is entertainment for all. And the key takeaway here is that businesses can tap into the gaming culture to convert players into payers, and I really like that phrase. Point six is here and now, and the theme around here and now is that there's no time like the present. The key takeaway here is that businesses should create campaigns that target special occasions, as well as providing alternative payment methods that can actually help split costs over time while catering to that immediate consumption desire. Point seven is revived routine, and the theme around that is out and about. And as we know that everybody's out and about post-COVID, it's about businesses needing to bring fun to re-engage with consumers and to actually help them attain a sense of normality again. Point eight, point that really stood out for you, Kevin, is She Rises, and the theme around that is a focus on female equality. And the takeaway here is that organizations need to be champions for She Rises, with diversity, equity, inclusion really sitting at the center of the organization's core values. Point nine is the Thrivers, and the theme around the Thrivers is putting life into perspective. The key takeaway here is that businesses can respond to this so-called weirdness with marketing that cuts through the noise and provides products and services that focuses on immediate needs. And last but not least, point 10 is young and disrupted, and a beautiful theme, the world is a stage. The point here is brands need a crash course on Gen Z trendsetters and the emerging professionals to be able to be in tune with their expectations, Kevin. And those are the key reminders from last week's conversation.
Fantastic. Guys, if you want to go and check that out, it is on the Lunchtime Series on YouTube. So go and check it out, or you can just go and see any major podcast channel and search for the Lunchtime series, and you'll find it there. Craig, so what do we have in place for today's conversation?
Kevin, I want to cover two articles today, and the first focusing on the topic of mass layoffs that we're seeing happening around the world, specifically across the tech-based companies that we all know so well and actually depend on each day, whether it's for communication or social engagement, etc. There are many articles covering the story on the web with news breaking each day. There was news last night about Spotify getting rid of another 725 staff, I think. So yeah, each day another company is announcing their intent to lay off more staff within their respective organizations. The first article I came across covering this topic is titled World Mass Layoffs Reasons, Why the World is Witnessing a Massive Job Loss in 2023. Now, just before starting, what's interesting here is that January's job losses or intentional job losses with the announcement of Amazon's second round included in that will be in excess of 70,000. That in itself is what took place from 2000 to 2022 going into pandemic. So really a significant number there, Kevin. The article was published on truescoopnews.com on 20th January this year and was written by Ujwal Samrat. So the article opens with this statement. Going by the reasons given by the companies, the four common reasons for mass layoffs are pandemic boom, overhiring during the pandemic, fear of recession, and inflation. Reasons like cost-cutting, subpar performance, and financial difficulties are all being highlighted by companies involved in the mass firings. While mass layoffs have touched almost every sector, the IT industry specifically are firing tens of thousands of employees.
Craig, what I'm not understanding about this conversation is why the IT industry? Because it's the fastest paced moving industry. It's the fastest growing industry. It doesn't make sense.
Kevin, the article provides some great insights to actually address that very topic, and there's some really good, simple understandings to answer you. The reason they're opting for mass layoffs, let me give you some of those reasons. So Microsoft's CEO advised employees in a blog post that the company will be laying off close to 5%, vis-a-vis 10,000 of its global employee base, due firstly to this slowdown in customer demand, and secondly, to a potential recession ahead. Meta, which is the parent company, as we know, of Facebook, Insta, and WhatsApp, implemented the largest tech layoff of 2022 by letting almost 13% or 11,000 of its employees go, due firstly, again, not being able to manage rising costs, and secondly, to a massive decline in advertising revenue. Amazon announced recently that it would implement the next round of layoffs by letting more than 18,000 of its employee base go, Kevin, due to declining online sales growth and the fact that a possible recession was severely impacting the spending power of consumers. What really stands out about Amazon, Kevin, is that this is the second announcement in mid-November 2022. Amazon laid off as much as 3% of its staff at that particular point, focusing primarily on the company's device segment, which obviously included the Alexa product and, take note, the retail and human resources business. So that was a really interesting point there. The 2023 round of layoffs is the largest in Amazon's history, Kevin. So yeah, quite a lot of damage being done through this. And then finally, let's look at the tech company that's probably received the most negative feedback during the announcement of any form of layoff process, that being Twitter. And just to set some context here, Elon Musk's acquisition of the social network platform Twitter for $40 billion ranks as one of the most expensive business acquisitions in history, Kevin. Twitter let over 50% or 3,700 of his employees base go due to primarily significant losses on a daily basis and the rapid decline in advertising revenue. And the thing that stood out here for me is that Twitter's layoff, in fact, included senior executives and the former CEO. So really, the axe has gone across every single level of these respective organizations.
So, I mean, I have a comment about Elon Musk. Is one of the things that, he has done is he has been quite disruptive. He has taken, he's made some decisions that are quite shocking, and kind of, and also introducing sort of microblogging now, because they're also going to be changing their format on how many characters you can actually use in your tweet.
Yes.
What some of the conversation, and this is, this I haven't fact checked yet, but what I've actually seen and heard of people saying is what Elon Musk has done has also curbed on child pornography and pedophile rings found on Twitter.
Oh, wow.
People who are responsible for these accounts. So he's also blocked those accounts, and he's also gone on quite a rampage of like curbing that as an industry, for the lack of a better word. So
that's
as
fantastic.
much as Elon Musk, he seems like a crazy scientist. If you dig for some more information about him, some of the stuff he's doing, as much as it is disruptive, it's not as some of the stuff he's doing is really incredible, and it's actually benefiting a lot of people. And it's like people trafficking and child pornography and all of that stuff. So
I'd love to stick on this topic for another half a minute. I think it was about 2 Sundays ago, maybe 3. Sunday Times headline was, can Elon save South Africa? Because we only need 300 billion rand for fixing Eskom debacle, which at the 17-1 of today is a he'll open his wallet for that.
Yeah.
I looked past the number aspect of the conversation or the question on the headline, and I went, that would be the best thing that ever happened, because he would come in here and fire every single lazy incompetent across every single organization, parastatal or entity that lays claim to being effective in running this country. And that would be the best thing. Get rid of the retards and allow these organizations to put the best folk in place on quality and merit to run this country effectively and allow it to be the shining star that it can be in the new world.
Craig, do you know what I don't, and I say this with a very hard, heavy heart, is if you look at the size of this country, the size of the population of this country, and the ability that we have, just purely based on tourism. If we just based it on tourism and what the tourist industry could do for this country, if we had less crime, more jobs, and more attraction to this country, just from a tourist perspective, we would be able to turn this country around in big ways. Because what we have to offer as a country, there are maybe a handful of countries in the world that can offer what we do, already offer, from from a tourist perspective. So I'm like, it's astonishing to think that the minority that's in power right now is keeping the majority really stupid and uneducated. And I heard recently on a news report that someone was on some news channel saying addicted to drugs. They're keeping people addicted to drugs, youth, especially minority youth, or the lower sort of earning income families. We're keeping those youth addicted to drugs, because that way they can't be more than they could be, right? And if we kept them there, then they can just keep raking in those votes, and it's just going to work. So, but I mean, slowly but surely, the tide is turning, and people are really, and I'm speaking not about white minority, but largely a lot of black people who are kind of going, we're fed up over this. It's done. We don't want this anymore. But I mean, Craig, one of the things that I do want to mention about the numbers you've just spoken about, and in the thousands, I'm like 70,000 and 18,000 and all these thousands of layoffs that they've had. There must be an adjustment where we're starting to realize that we, as employees, we cannot be so readily reliant on big corporate anymore.
Yes, good point.
Because, and I think that's what people are, and that's where this hybrid working situation, remote working, that sort of remote working kind of person who now likes to sort of make their own time and, you know, prepare their own schedule kind of thing. I think a lot more people are moving towards that based on, you know, especially in IT, you know, if you're working in IT, you don't have to be in an office. You can do anything, anywhere, everywhere, you know. It's just a case of going, how do we then take that model out of the equation and start saying, well, stop relying on big markets like this and big organization, and start, you know, letting them pay you per hour, and rather have 3 or 4 of those clients doing that all the time. And instead of just committing to this one company that you could write a blog post and say, oh, by the way, guys, you're up for your time's up. Like, that's not cool. I don't, and it doesn't, you know, it really affects huge masses of people and economies to such a degree that something needs to change about that equation, about how that's playing out.
So I think the one part of the equation for me that's missing is the psychology of the moment. And what I mean by this is this incredible negativity that brought us to the place we were, but this incredible positivity that came out of it, where organizations readjusted to meet the high demands of online, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. But where was the psychology of really understanding what brought on that demand, what the world looked like previously, what the future world may actually look like, and why did they make judgment calls that the new norm would be the baseline coming out of COVID? Did people in these positions not really think about the fact that there would be a recalibration somewhere along the way, and that there would be a settling down to that level of normality previously experienced somewhere along the way, and that would have had devastating impacts on the overskilling, oversupply, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera.
Craig, but and that's why I call BS on all of it, because you can't tell me that Twitter or Amazon or Microsoft don't have the aptitude and the ability and the brain power to kind of go, okay, how do we mitigate the fact that we have to lay off people? What else do we come up with? What other solutions are there? Or what do we start? What is the sideline sort of second kind of business that we can sort of migrate towards, that we don't have to lay off people? Because what they suddenly now in this month realized, oh yeah, you know, we might be going for a recession. Let me write a blog. Like, that's almost cruel. It's cruelty, you know. And I think with the amount of money that these corporations earn, they have the manpower and brain power to solve this equation. I think this is a cop-out, and I think it's quite easy for them to do, and it shouldn't be done. It shouldn't be allowed.
I'm 100%, and hence me making my statement. There's a flaw. Somewhere there's a flaw that every single organization of that capacity and caliber didn't have hindsight, because their foresight would have been built on hindsight, to establish what that readjusted base is. It cannot continue at that trajectory infinity.
Yeah. It doesn't make sense how
it doesn't.
Did this. But I mean, while you mentioned 4 common reasons for the layoffs, Craig, you've just highlighted. Can you expand on just a bit more of these?
Yeah, Kevin, you're right. I gave it a snapshot. Let's actually unpack it a little bit more. So, picking up on those four reasons for the mass layoffs. The first one being pandemic boom, Kevin, and here we saw the significant rise in technology demand and adoption during the COVID pandemic, which obviously saw people spending an inordinate amount of time online, with the net result that these companies all increased their output to meet these ever-increasing market demands. The point we've just made, actually. The second point, unpacking a bit more here, is the over-hiring during the pandemic. And it's an obvious expectation, considering the fact that all of the tech-based companies actually had to gear up to meet that ever-increasing consumer demand during the pandemic. This, however, resulted in significant loss across many of the companies, with some resources actually coming at a much higher cost because of that upsurge in demand. So the supply and demand equation coming to bear there. The third point that we spoke about earlier was fear of recession, a really real fear, Kevin. And this is really talking about the multiple challenges that the world is facing now, many of which are born out of the COVID pandemic, but all pointing to the reality of a global recession. And the significant debts amassed by most of these organizations during the pandemic clearly point to a recession, which has resulted in many of the companies is cutting costs by closing down divisions, offloading low-performing projects, and actually laying off excess and high-cost resources that they hired to accelerate that growth and to meet those online demands during the pandemic, as we just mentioned now. But a serious reality check noted in a series of studies conducted by the likes of Business Insider and PwC note the following. Business Insider noted that CEOs predict a recession and economic uncertainty as a guarantee in 2023, with PwC noting through a study conducted in October and November last year across 4,400 or so CEOs in about 100 countries, and nearly 75% of those CEOs, Kevin, believe that the global economy will continue to slow over the next 12 months. And to quote PwC consultancy, the consultancy characterized the stark prediction as the most pessimistic CEOs have been about economic forecasts since it began asking questions a dozen years ago. So it's the most pessimistic CEOs have been in the past 12 years. And that's quite a scary place to be. And then the last point is really it's a complex point because there are many attributes that drive this, but inflation. And we've learned that inflation has increased to its highest levels in almost 4 decades, Kevin, across the world, resulting in many central banks being forced to increase the interest rates, which in turn reduces the amount of liquidity and capital available in the markets. And that capital and liquidity is actually required to drive ongoing investments. So it's just this negative back-to-back. According to John McClitch, he's the chief investment officer at Ancora Investment House in Cleveland. The pandemic is probably just the event that exposed over a decade of underinvestment in the global commodity supply chain and the vulnerable of just-in-time inventories to sort of supply stock. So COVID-19 pandemic and subsequent supply chain disruptions combated with lax monetary and fiscal policy as a result of the pandemic causing inflation to persist. So quite heavy-handed accusations around the fact that the world was already in a state of disrepair, and it was these 10 years or so of underinvestment in some of the key delivery value chains and things like that just capitulated to bring us to the point coming out of the pandemic, Kevin.
It just doesn't make sense, Craig. Like I'm still like, that sounds like pessimistic CEOs. That just sounds like they're having a bad moment. I'm like, why don't you pick up your big lip and get on with it? If you're in that position, you should be innovating at the speed of light.
Speed of light.
It's not an excuse. I don't like if you're making the amounts of money that these people are making at that level, you don't have an excuse to just go, oh well, the pandemic has affected us and we're having a bad 12 years. Like we're pessimistic. Like bull. Like screw you for that. Like that's not cool. I don't agree with that.
It's like Kevin, to close on the point, it's almost like the perfect storm because the collective of factors like increasing inflation, the rising interest rates, cost cutting, relocation of offices, buyouts coming out of COVID, mergers and acquisitions. There's the constant ongoing challenge of supply chain issues, increasing fuel costs around the world, and then the global economic challenges and serious geopolitical issues like the war in Ukraine. Collectively, they've all impacted on revenue growth for these tech companies. And obviously, one of the ways that these companies have tried to improve the bottom line in their balance sheets is just lay off large tranches of headcount. A tough decision for CEOs, no doubt, but it really does, to me, it raises the question of actually who's actually running these companies. Are the CEO and leadership team, Or is it the greedy shareholders that demand unrealistic linear growth and higher returns, even during these trying times, that actually are placing the pressure on these management teams and leadership teams to try and move the dial? For me, I think it's the latter.
Yeah, I think there's something that's like an unspoken happening here that that they're not sort of looking after, and there is probably greed and a little bit of an underlying unfair expectation, considering there are quite a few many factors that are influencing many decisions.
Yes,
but I still stand at the point that as the CEO of Amazon. How well do you know what motivates your teams? How well do you know what motivates your people? How well do you know, all the human factors that, play into this? It's like 18,000 people layoffs that's a lot of people for one company. It's very, as a shareholder or as part of an executive team, I would want to know exactly how you got to that decision. Like, give it to me in like plain, simple English, because it's you're affecting a lot of people's. And I think that's the other thing is, like, I think it's the accountable factor. Where's the accountability? Like, so
yes.
you put it out there and you give people jobs and because you're pessimistic and because of greedy shareholders, you haven't come up with an ulterior motive or an ulterior solution for people to kind of think about. Or I don't know. I don't think it's fair.
And really, the 18,000 is just the tip of the triangle, because below that is all the layers of dependency and codependency from every single individual in those 18,000 just in one organization. How many family members are dependent on that salary? How many communities does it affect? How many retail stores and bakeries and groceries and drivers and Uber folk? If you look down the value chain of a day in the life of, that trickle down effect at the bottom of the pyramid is substantially larger than the small effect at the top. And that is just devastating.
Well, that also then kind of, because that's sort of happening and it's having this ripple effect into to society at large. The question is there a reason? Is there a reason why people are actively doing this? Because if they can keep people in panic, people respond in panic very differently to when people are not panicking.
Yes.
And you're gonna have to like there must be some kind of reason why it's being done. It's the same, like with closing your borders in the country when we first heard about the pandemic. Doing it for enough countries put everyone into a state of panic, and everybody started doing it. So you have to kind of ask what is happening, what's behind the scenes here, because it just doesn't make sense.
Are you a good conspiracy theorist, Kevin?
No, but I don't. Well, I suppose I am if I'm bringing it up as conspiracy theory. But I mean, like it just does. It seems crazy that you have this boom of moving from working in working in an office block to having to work with technology. And 2 years later, oh no, we're all being laid off. Like 18,000 people being laid off from one company based on the fact there's a recession and people are having a bad day. Like, that doesn't make sense. It just doesn't make sense. I mean, yes, there are factors that influence it, but it doesn't make sense. You mentioned that you're going to address 2 articles today. What is the next article we're going to cover? Because I'll get carried away with this one.
I'm actually smiling as you ask the question, because the next article that I want to address, Kevin, is a great read that I came across on Forbes.com, and I love Forbes.com. It was titled 8 Strategies for Avoiding Layoffs During Turbulent Times. And that's the article.
Craig. I like it.
Yeah, the article provides a number of simple yet effective points on how to manage the expectations of laying off staff during difficult times. And it really is a great segue from the first article we covered, Kevin. The article was written by the Forbes Council expert panel, which was consisting of the Young Entrepreneurial Council members. And it opens with the following statement, take note. During difficult economic times, layoffs are often the first fears that enter professionals' minds. Whether it's a sudden economic downturn or a looming recession, many business leaders resort to laying off staff in a desperate attempt to keep their companies afloat. Even successful tech companies and large financial corporations sometimes exercise this type of cost-cutting measure. However, layoffs don't have to be the only solution.
Which I'm looking forward to hearing what the expert panel has.
Yeah,
That's my language. I like that.
Yeah, I thoroughly enjoyed the reading, and I've just pulled. So the 8 points, each of them were addressed by a particular member on the council panel, and I've just sort of pulled 2 or 3 bullet points of the core content that they shared, Kevin. So the first of those points is about find ways to create more value. What a great point to start with. So during uncertain economic times, management should focus on creating true value for their customers instead of going on the defensive and laying off staff. Great point. If organizations dedicate 100% of their focus on delivering that true value to their customers, this can surely but only translate into growing the business and therefore staying profitable. And this point was authored by Isabel Shee from Grow Word and Management. The second point here is consider temporary pay cuts or reduced hours. So instead of laying off staff, Kevin, companies can actually ask employees if they'd be willing to reduce their hours or take a temporary pay cut to help the company weather through the tough times. And that's something I've experienced firsthand, on 2 occasions. And as hard as it may be, it really does help the business stay the course in many instances. And the great takeout on this point here, Kevin, is this reference to open and transparent communications, and that a fair and equitable approach has been taken should reductions actually be necessary. And we note that it is helpful to offer support services such as counseling or financial planning resources to help employees through these transitions. So yeah, great point, authored by Vikas Argwal from Info Brands. The third point here is audit your spending in other areas. Staff cuts are often implemented in order to achieve break even when times are tough and when the company is not making as much money as they spend. We learn that if reducing headcount is not possible, companies can often achieve break even by auditing their spend and making cuts in other areas of the business where there's overspend. And such examples include cutting certain partners and vendors, migrating SaaS tools to a lower tier premium, and obtaining reduced rates or discounts from the most expensive contractors and vendors, Kevin. So very simple functional approach there. And this point was authored by Cooper Harris from Clickly. The fourth point is focus on cash management. Hugely important. One of the key requirements for any business to succeed is cash management, Kevin. And when reserves are in place, layoffs can be avoided to some extent. It is also important to arrange an adequate line of credit with the banks where possible, focusing on building that reserve account and identifying the areas where to cut unnecessary costs or expenses and delay any large capital outlay or expansion plans. This point was authored by Joel Matthew of Fortress Consulting.
Yeah, Craig, I mean, and I can see that, just it doesn't necessarily have to be major kind of things that you need to do, but the tweaking of what's happening, reduced hours, finding better ways to really lay into better selling and really getting your product out there. Like it's possible to change it up and be agile enough and have that kind of approach, because I think it is possible.
It is.
More for us, yeah.
Yes, yeah, actually. So the fifth point is invest in a cross-training program. It's actually something you mentioned prior to us jumping onto this call today. Yeah. So if you invest in a well-defined and a highly structured cross-training program, that's definitely a way to mitigate laying off employees, especially if team members are flexible and can actually work across the multiple roles. You can shift staff around when one department or role stagnates. It's simple as that. The highlight point here is that the team with diverse skill sets and abilities are actually essential for business leaders across all industries who want to ensure maximum productivity and job security. So that is a principle in business should actually become a norm now moving forward. No more excuses. This point was authored by Chris Christophoff, and it's from Monster Insights. The sixth point is embrace remote workforce. So point we've actually spoken about a few times as well is, definitely worth having a remote workforce. This allows those businesses to reduce costs by eliminating the need for structured office spaces, associated expenses, rent, utilities, equipment, etc., and investing in an asynchronous communications tool that can actually help businesses become more efficient by enabling employees to work at their own pace, I should say, without sacrificing quality, I suppose, at their own place as well. Freudian slip there. This can lead to cost savings, which in turn can help companies avoid layoffs and keep their staff aboard in tough times. The point was authored by Saeed Balki from WP Beginner. Seventh point is consider all sources of funding and financing, and a critical review of the company's financial situation and an honest assessment of whether you really need to lay off employees is important, keeping in mind the reality of economic fluctuations. And that's a really good point, because there is the peak and trough reality that we live in, whether it's a 3-year, 5-year, 7-year cycle. It's about understanding and being able to recalibrate for when the next upturn comes along. Retain valuable employees. It's good not only for the long-term health of the business, but most definitely for morale. If cash flow is a problem, Kevin, it's about looking for all possible sources of financing. If you get paid through invoicing, look at the invoice factoring or invoice financing solutions. That definitely helps with cash flow management. And this point was authored by Kaylin Kasabah from ProTexting. And the last point here, leverage a mix of contractors and full-time staff. This is a point we've covered in reality. When times are tough, companies can definitely make use of outsourced labor or teams as a combination of contractors and full-time employees. This will definitely help mitigate having to implement huge-scale layoffs. Structure your business from the beginning to work around that sort of amorphous, flexible, hybrid kind of model. This allows businesses to maintain a core team of employees while actually leveraging the skills and expertise of contractors where needed and letting go when the business is in a slow state. And Kevin, the digital world's created many opportunities for companies to access contract workers, which then allows those businesses to remain lean, remain competitive, and not have to lose its trusted workforce. This point was authored by Tanika Bruce from Lead Nicely Inc. And that's a wrap from our side.
Fantastic, Craig. I love it. Yes, I think it's a great reference. And guys, it's you said Forbes, Craig, that you found.
Yes, that's correct. Yes.
So 8 strategies for avoiding layoffs during turbulent times. I think it's a fantastic reference to go and check out, guys. But I mean, with that being our end of today's show, what do we have coming up for our next week's show, Craig?
Kevin, I'm sort of toying with a couple of ideas, but I think one of the topics that really is jumping out at me is, what does it take to be a digital mindset company?
Digital mindset company.
Yes. Yes.
That's going to interest me. I'd love to know. Tell me more.
Yeah. So that's the one area, and then following through from that, just going back to some of the basic marketing principles and communication principles. I've come across 2 or 3 nice articles that'll fill a really great show in that regard. So two great weeks ahead of some compelling content, and then the one thing that is taking a lot of effort. I'm wanting to get around the table the chief creative officers of the top 5 creative agencies in South Africa and talk about the impact of AI and our beloved chatbot.
GPT, yes.
GPT, there we go. And really talk about how that is influencing creativity. And we've seen a week of incredible commentary around the sphere, with ads being made, artwork being made, fashion ranges being made, and it'd be good to have an open conversation to get to have the creative leaders to actually bring their points of view to the fore around that particular topic.
And that's where I'm like, well, I don't see the problem. I don't see the fear, and I don't see what the problem is. Like, why are we not leaning into ChatGPT here?
So that's just the thing, is how far do you lean in, and what does that take? And that's why I'd like top creative directors from the top 5 agencies in the country around the table having that conversation.
Fantastic. I'm looking forward to it. Craig, thank you so much, guys. Catch the Lunchtime series on ebizradio.com every Thursday at 12 o'clock. And we'll chat to you soon. Thanks, Craig.
Thank you. Thanks for the show. Cheers, Kevin.
Cheers. Bye.